Confidence is not a feeling you wait for, it's a relationship with uncertainty, the ability to act despite doubt rather than waiting for doubt to clear. Most people have it backwards. They wait to feel confident before acting, when in reality the feeling almost always follows action. People who appear confident didn't wake up flooded with self-belief. They acted with significant internal doubt, accumulated evidence, and gradually built a felt sense of competence. Action first. Feeling second. One where low confidence comes from. Low confidence has roots, usually in early experiences, and understanding them makes change possible. Children absorb messages about themselves from parents, teachers, and peers without the capacity to evaluate whether those messages are true. Labels like shy, not academic, or awkward, applied repeatedly in childhood, often become identity facts carried into adulthood long after the conditions that produced them no longer exist. Environments that were unpredictable, critical, or emotionally unsafe also make confidence harder to develop, since they orient a child's attention outward toward monitoring threats rather than inward toward building a stable sense of self. Sustained comparison in competitive environments, being consistently last or least at something visible, creates an experiential basis for beliefs about capability that outlast the environments themselves. Social rejection during adolescence leaves a particularly deep impression, producing a vigilance around social situations that continues into adulthood as anxiety, even when the adult environment is completely different. Understanding these origins isn't about assigning blame, it's about recognizing what you're actually working with. 2. The confidence cycle. Confidence exists as a self-reinforcing loop. Beliefs influence what actions you're willing to take. Actions generate experiences. Experiences are interpreted and added to your evidence about yourself, which reinforces or modifies the original beliefs. When the starting belief is "I'll probably fail or be judged," the loop runs negatively. Avoidance means no new experience to challenge the belief, and half-committed attempts tend to go poorly, seeming to confirm it. The same cycle runs positively when seeded deliberately. A tentative belief leads to a small attempt, which produces experience, which adds a piece of evidence of capability, which slightly strengthens the belief for the next attempt. The crucial variable inside this cycle is interpretation. Two people can have the identical experience and produce completely different evidence from it depending on their interpretive default. People with low confidence tend toward negative interpretation bias, automatically reading ambiguous feedback in the least favorable light. Learning to ask, is the most negative interpretation the most accurate one? Doesn't require forced positivity, just being as fair to yourself as you'd be to anyone else. 3. The body and confidence. The relationship between physical and psychological state runs both ways. Posture, breathing, and tension don't just reflect how you feel, they actively influence it. Closed posture activates threat response systems. Open, upright posture activates engagement systems, producing a measurable internal shift within minutes. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing anxiety and creating space for clear thinking. Regular physical exercise improves confidence through multiple mechanisms. It provides repeated evidence of physical capability, produces neurochemical changes that reduce anxiety, and builds a relationship with the body as something resilient rather than something primarily experienced as a source of inadequacy. Sleep matters more than is commonly acknowledged. The harsh inner critic is loudest when exhausted, and protecting sleep is protecting the internal environment in which all other confidence work operates. 4. Self-talk and the internal narrative. Every person carries on a more or less continuous internal commentary. For people with low confidence, this commentary is often far harsher than anything they direct at another person, relentless, critical, applied to the self in ways that would be recognized as cruel if said aloud. This internal narrative matters because it determines what evidence the confidence cycle collects. A voice that says, "You're going to mess this up" before an attempt, and typical, You always do this, after any imperfection, generates constant internal evidence of inadequacy regardless of what's actually happening externally. The goal isn't to replace this voice with affirmations, which tend not to work because the gap between affirmation and felt reality is too large to bridge with repetition alone. The goal is to develop a reasonable inner observer, neither harsh critic nor unconditional cheerleader, but something closer to a fair, caring friend who tells the truth without cruelty. Useful practice. Write down a self-critical thought, then rewrite it in the voice you'd use for a friend. Over months, this recalibrates the default. 5. Setting goals and building evidence. One of the most reliable ways to build confidence is to set goals and meet them, repeatedly, at a level of challenge that's meaningful without being overwhelming. People with low confidence tend to set goals that are either too small, no real evidence of capability, or too large, likely to fail, reinforcing the original belief. The productive zone is in between, genuinely stretching but realistically achievable with honest effort. Proximal goals, shorter milestones within a larger aim, provide regular evidence of progress rather than requiring a long wait for any sense of competence. Define goals in process terms where possible. Contribute 2 substantive points. Rather than outcome terms, do a good job, since process is within your control and outcomes are not. Keep a written record of goals met. However small, concrete evidence is harder to dismiss than memory, which distorts toward confirming existing beliefs. 6. Stepping outside your comfort zone. The comfort zone is the range of situations that feel familiar and manageable without significant anxiety. Staying inside it is comfortable but produces no new evidence of capability and no expansion of confidence. What's most effective isn't a dramatic leap, but a consistent habit of doing things slightly beyond the current edge, progressive exposure, such that the zone gradually expands. Each encounter with something anxiety-provoking, handled and survived, slightly reduces the anxiety response for that situation type and expands what feels manageable. The key distinction here is between discomfort and danger. Low confidence treats discomfort as a signal of genuine threat. It almost never is. Anxiety is an uncomfortable feeling, not a reliable indicator of danger. And developing the ability to feel it without immediately escaping is one of the most significant confidence-building shifts available. 7. Handling criticism and rejection. For someone with low confidence, criticism tends to land as confirmation of what the self-doubting voice has been saying. The first useful distinction is between feedback and attack. Feedback contains information about how work was received, useful regardless of how pleasantly delivered. An attack is a judgment about the person rather than the work, and usually says more about the person delivering it. Delay the full emotional response long enough to engage with the content. The instinct is usually to either reject criticism entirely or accept it completely, and both are emotional reactions rather than considered evaluations. Giving yourself a day creates space for a more accurate assessment of what's genuinely useful versus what reflects the limits of the person giving it. Rejection carries less information than criticism, often just no, which makes it harder to work with. The most important thing is not letting repeated rejection accumulate into a global conclusion about worth. Each rejection is evidence only about that specific person, in that context, at that moment. 8. Confidence in social situations. Social confidence is most commonly misunderstood as being extroverted or entertaining. Real social confidence is quieter. The ability to show up as yourself, engage genuinely, and handle the inevitable awkwardness of human interaction without treating it as catastrophe. The most significant driver of social anxiety is excessive self-focus, monitoring your words and presentation rather than actually paying attention to the other person. Redirecting attention outward, toward genuine curiosity about the person in front of you, tends to both improve the interaction and reduce anxiety. Asking thoughtful questions and listening well removes the pressure to perform, while producing interactions others consistently experience as genuinely engaging. Physical anxiety symptoms, racing heart, flushing, voice shaking, are almost always far more noticeable to the person experiencing them than to anyone else. Many outwardly confident people experience them too. The difference is tolerance, not absence. 9. Confidence in professional settings. Low professional confidence most commonly shows up as imposter syndrome, the persistent sense of not truly deserving your position and of risking discovery. It's remarkably common across all career stages and levels of objective success, which is itself useful data. If the majority of accomplished people experience this, it clearly isn't a reliable indicator of actual inadequacy. A related pattern is attributing successes to external factors while attributing failures to internal ones, which means professional achievements don't update self-concept the way they should. Practicing more accurate attribution, acknowledging your own skill and effort where genuinely present, is one of the most direct ways of allowing achievements to build confidence. Speaking up in meetings, advocating for yourself, volunteering for visible opportunities, all respond to the same graduated exposure logic. Start smaller, build a track record, let evidence compound. 10. Confidence in creative work. Creative confidence is particularly challenging because it involves putting something personally made into the world and subjecting it to evaluation. Most serious creative practitioners go through regular periods of doubt and inadequacy, sometimes called the gap between taste and current skill, most acute at the beginning of a creative journey. Understanding that this gap is nearly universal and closes through practice rather than inspiration reduces the sense that it's a personal failing. The most practical creative confidence strategy is volume, continuing to make things even when you don't like what you're making, trusting that quality emerges from consistent practice. Sharing work in low-stakes ways first is its own confidence cycle. Every time work is shared and survived, confidence grows slightly. Every time fear keeps it private indefinitely, the fear strengthens. 11. Confidence in relationships. Relational confidence, showing up honestly in close relationships, asking for what you need, maintaining your own perspective under social pressure, and being genuinely known rather than performed, is among the most personally significant dimensions of confidence and among the most difficult to develop. At its root, most relational low confidence involves a fear that the real self, fully seen, would not be acceptable to others. This fear usually traces to early experiences where a fuller version of the self was rejected or not responded to, and is carried forward as a general expectation. The antidote is small, graduated steps toward genuine self-disclosure, discovering that the actual response from people worth connecting with tend to be considerably more accepting than the feared response. Setting appropriate boundaries requires both the confidence to know what matters and the confidence to say so, and develops through the same practice of small, honest steps. 12. Maintaining confidence through setbacks. A temporary drop in confidence after a significant setback is normal and doesn't mean the underlying confidence was fake. Confidence was never meant to shield against disappointment. It was meant to be a way of relating to yourself that could survive it and continue. The practices that support this are the same ones discussed throughout. Post-mortem of what went wrong without sweeping self-judgment, self-compassion in response to difficulty, attention to the shift from event language to identity language, and deliberate return to action after a pause. Each survived setback adds to cumulative evidence of resilience. I've been in difficult places before and continued. Protecting your environment during vulnerable periods matters. People and content that highlight what you lack make recovery slower. This isn't avoidance. It's stewardship of a resource that's temporarily depleted. 13. Self-compassion. Self-compassion is commonly misunderstood as excuse-making. Research shows the opposite. People who treat themselves with reasonable kindness after failure take more responsibility, not less, and are more willing to try again. Harsh self-criticism triggers defensiveness or shutdown. Neither supports honest reflection. Compassion, recognizing failure as part of shared human experience and responding with basic warmth rather than cruelty, creates enough internal safety for honest examination to happen. A simple check. Notice the tone of your internal commentary after a setback, then ask whether you'd speak to a friend that way. The gap between that answer and the actual internal tone is roughly how far the self-talk has to travel. 14. Confidence and authenticity. Genuine confidence and authenticity tend to reinforce each other. Being more authentically yourself, showing actual thoughts and personality rather than a carefully managed presentation, is both an act that requires confidence and one that builds it. Receiving a genuine response to who you actually are is more nourishing than receiving enthusiasm for a performance of yourself, because the second kind of validation doesn't land on the real self. Self-acceptance, acknowledging the full range of what's true about yourself, including limitations, without those limitations undermining overall self-worth, is the most durable foundation for confidence. It means saying, "I'm not naturally strong here and I'm working on it," without that feeling like evidence of fundamental inadequacy. This develops slowly through accumulated experience, but points toward something far more stable than either performed confidence or relentless self-criticism. 15. The role of environment and others. Confidence is significantly influenced by surrounding people and environments, and deliberately curating that surrounding is one of the most practical and underused strategies available. The people you spend most time with influence confidence through comparison, normalization, and reflected appraisal. The sense of who you are that comes back through how others treat you. Time with people who consistently treat you as capable gradually updates self-concept in that direction. Time with people who consistently undermine you works in the opposite direction, regardless of internal resolve. Mentors matter both through direct encouragement and through the existence proof of someone from a similar starting point having built something meaningful. Seeking communities where your contributions are visible and valued isn't a luxury. It's a genuine confidence investment. 16. Comparison. Comparison is one of the most consistently confidence-undermining patterns, and also one of the most automatic. The most damaging form is comparing your inside to someone else's outside. You have full access to your own doubt and worst moments. You see others primarily through what they choose to present. This comparison is inherently unfair and will always produce an unfavorable result for you. A related problem is comparing outcomes without comparing contexts, seeing achievement without visibility into the resources, timing, and circumstances that contributed to it. The most useful reframe is comparing yourself to previous versions of yourself. Am I better at this than 6 months ago? This comparison is accurate, motivating, and entirely within your own control. 17. Daily practices for sustained confidence. Confidence is built through consistent small daily habits, not occasional large efforts. Starting each day by identifying what's within your control keeps attention on the only domain where genuine agency exists. One small comfort zone action each day keeps the exposure process consistently active. A brief end-of-day reflection noting what was handled counteracts the tendency to let achievements pass unregistered, while imperfections are examined at length. Regular movement of any kind supports confidence. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Periodically revisiting your values provides a stable reference point that makes individual failures less destabilizing, since self-worth grounded in values isn't undermined by any single outcome. 18. Confidence and purpose. Confidence built primarily through personal performance can become fragile, always measured against some imagined better version of yourself. Confidence built through contribution has a different quality. When the question shifts from "How am I doing?" to "Did this help?" the feedback loop is more grounding. People who engage in service or mentoring often report a quiet confidence distinct from achievement-oriented contexts because they have direct evidence of useful capability rather than just a relative standing. A sense of purpose provides motivation during periods when self-belief is temporarily in short supply. Purpose doesn't need to be grand. What matters is a genuine sense that what you're doing connects to something that matters. 19. From confidence to courage. Confidence is a relationship with yourself grounded in real experience and honest self-assessment. Courage is the willingness to act even when confidence isn't complete, to engage with uncertainty, not because the outcome feels assured, but because the action aligns with what's important. Waiting for full confidence before acting is the same trap that keeps low confidence in place. Action produces the evidence from which confidence grows, so waiting means the evidence never accumulates. Many of the most meaningful things happen not in a state of complete confidence, but in a state of "I'm uncertain how this will go, and it matters enough to try anyway." This is confidence at its most mature, integrated with values, tolerant of uncertainty, willing to move forward without a guarantee. Conclusion. Confidence is not a destination reached and then held permanently. It is an ongoing practice, a way of relating to yourself that needs to be maintained through consistent action, attention, and self-compassion, especially in the face of setbacks. The practices here: attending to self-talk, taking graduated action, building evidence through goals met, developing a compassionate relationship with mistakes, and grounding self-worth in values, are not a course to complete and then set aside. They are habits that produce something durable, a quiet, grounded sense of capability that doesn't depend on everything going well, that recovers from setbacks without collapsing, and allows for full engagement with whatever matters most. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to begin.